And thank you. This session is officially being recorded. Thank you for joining me this evening. I really appreciate your attendance. I know you guys were not even supposed to join, but because you wanted to keep me company or because you're available, you decided to join me this evening. I know it's late for others, but we'll record this session so that they can be able to watch it at a later stage. And you are more than welcome to go and watch the session as well at a later stage. And I will obviously appreciate your honest feedback if it's working for you, if it doesn't work for you, if you would like me to make any changes, if I speak too fast, if I speak too slow. Feedback is usually very important in terms of progress. So I love feedback, even if you have to criticize. I am more than welcome to accept any kind of feedback because that's the only way that I can grow, learn, and be able to understand myself as a human being. Okay, cool. Now that is out of the way, when we're done with this session for domicile, you will have to be able to explain what is meant by domicile, to explain the importance of domicile for the private law status of a person. You'll be able to identify different types of domicile and explain what each type involves. And then you should be able to compare the current position to the position before the commencement of the act, which is the Domicile Act. I pronounce it as domicile. Some people pronounce it as domicile. I'm not Latin, so I will stick to domicile. So you will recall that from our previous sessions of this module, law of persons, there are certain factors that influence a person's status. And one of those factors is age, marital or extramarital status, insanity, prodigality, and domicile. So today we're going to be talking about domicile. In our next session, we're going to talk about age and marital status, insanity, and prodigality, probably at the end of the module. Was that for me? I don't know if you're talking to me, but if you're talking to me, I'm going to repeat so that I can give you a chance. I will continue if, what did I do now? You see this clicking? It's always a problem for me because I don't know what I clicked now. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, so let's continue. So you will know that different countries have different legal systems. So, for example, an 18-year-old boy or an 18-year-old girl can get married without parental consent. That is in South Africa. And then in Spain, on the other hand, a 25-year-old requires parental consent to get married. This might seem simple, but these differences, they might cause problems, guys. That is me typing. I was doing voice typing here, so please don't judge me. Okay, so these differences, they might cause bigger problems in different countries. So let's put it this way. If that 23-year-old, okay, we said 18 in South Africa, but let's look at this in a practical way. We put a 23-year-old South African and a 23-year-old Spanish together. So we have this 23-year-old in South African that wants to get married in Spain. The question is, will they require consent? Now that we have seen here that anyone under the age of 25 requires parental consent in Spain to get married, And then an 18-year-old in South Africa can get married. But now this person is 23 years old and they are in Spain and they want to get married. Will they require consent? Because the Spanish authorities do not allow a person under the age of 23 to get married. Will they require parental consent in order for them to be married in Spain? And on the other way, if a 23-year-old Spanish citizen just arrived in South Africa and he wants to get married, and according to the Spanish laws, he cannot get married, he requires parental consent, but he is now in South Africa now, and he wants to get married, he wants to take advantage of the South African legal system. What do you think? I know, what do you think? Do you think he will be able to get married in South Africa or not? And the other way around for the South African.
Mr. T,
Yes,
I will
Mark?
say that.
Sorry?
Hi, Mr. T, it's Mark here.
Yes, Mark?
I will say if they are in Spain, then they obviously will get, they must get permission because of the legislation in Spain requires them to do so.
Are we talking about the South African now?
No, I'm talking about the Spanish person, but I mean, if the South African is staying in Spain, then obviously he will fall under the Spain legislation, whether he is now a South African or not, because he's protected by that law. So for me,
yeah,
so for me, when they in Spain, they need the necessary authorization from the parents. Whereas in South Africa, they don't need it because the South African law is obviously will give them that permission, because the permission is if you're 18 years old, then you can get married, and they're over 18, so they don't need any permission from the parents to do so.
Yeah,
that's my.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. That sounds legally correct and logically correct. But let's say, let me challenge you on this one. Let's say this 23-year-old South African was visiting Spain. Let's focus on the South African. Let's say they were visiting Spain. Do you think that will still apply?
That's his domicile at the end of the day is South Africa if he's just visiting there.
Yeah,
his temporary domicile will be at the place where he stays in Spain. And I mean that African law doesn't have any authority over a Spanish law or any country's law. So for me, it's still the same. If he wants to get married in Spain, he must abide by the laws of Spain.
That sounds legally correct, and thank you, Mr. Mark. So in South Africa, this is how we do it. In South Africa, this will be the place where the person is domiciled. So it's we call it lexi loci domicile, meaning the law of the place where a person is domiciled. So there is your answer, Mark. If the 23-year-old that is domiciled in South Africa will not, according to South African law, require parental consent to get married, I think I need to shy away from voice typing. So they will not require parental consent to get married in Spain, because the domicile that we look at is the fact that they're from South Africa, they are domiciled in South Africa, and they're not legally they are not domiciled in Spain at that particular moment. So therefore, they will not require parental consent. The same principle will apply to the 23-year-old Spaniard who is domiciled in Spain and comes to South Africa and tries to take advantage of the South African legal system. And then in South Africa, we will have to look at where this person is actually domiciled, because at this time they're domiciled in Spain, and according to the Spanish authorities, a 23-year-old needs consent to get married. Therefore, they will need that consent to get married even in South Africa. So so the South African law and the Spanish law differ in respect of the status of a 23-year-old person. So from this, I really need to stop this voice typing, guys. I'm sorry. Okay, fine. So domicile is the place where a person is legally deemed to reside for the purposes of exercising his or her rights and duties. But while we say domicile is the place where a person is legally deemed to reside for the purposes of exercising his rights or her duties, let's not confuse domicile with nationality. It's two different things. Domicile determines a person's status for the purposes of private law, while on the other hand, nationality determines his or her status for the purposes of public law. Domicile is derived from the Latin word it's domicili, something like that. I'll put it for you guys on the chat box. It means home or a dwelling place. And then this definition, you can see it on this particular case. You can actually browse this case. I can check the case citation and give it to you, and then you will see just the definition. It's not necessarily a case that you need to know. It's just for the particular definition, how they define domicile in that particular case. So as I said, it refers to a place or a country which is considered by law. So domicile is particularly important when it comes to law of succession. So I'm sure you guys are aware what is law of succession. 100% sure that if you are studying LLB or BA law, you will do law of succession as a module. So in case of interstate succession, the dissolution of estate is determined by lexi loci domicile of the deceased at the time of his or her death. So the interstate succession, I don't know if I explained to you guys previously. So there is interstate succession and then there is testate succession, right? So in law of succession, you will find out that interstate succession is where a person dies and they didn't have a will, right? And then testate is where a person dies and there was a will. So in the domicile context, for example, if someone dies without a will, let's say they are on holiday in the Bahamas or Spain, and their estate will devolve according to South African law because that is where they are domiciled. So even if they were on maybe a long visit, as long as they are not domiciled in the Bahamas, according to interstate succession, their estate will be shared according to South African law. So testate succession, on the other hand, is where there was a will. So, okay, so this is where I stopped. Okay, let's just go back to the main screen. Okay, cool. So this is where I stopped. So with regards to testate succession, it is when there was a will, that person has died, and then there is a will. So the domicile, the testator's lexi local domicile, at the time of drafting the will, it is the one that will determine whether he or she had the capacity to draw up a will, as well as whether he or she complied with the formalities for executing a valid will. So if the person that like the testator. Okay, so now they are dead, and then they have a will. So it is up to them when that person has died. It is up to them, like when they're drafting the will, to say, okay, when I die, I would like my estate to be distributed according to South African law, or I would like it to be distributed according to the American law. So if it was their wish and they did include it on the will, it will be followed according to their wishes, regardless of where they are domiciled. So we look at, if they didn't mention that, we look at where they drafted the will or the time of their death. So if they indicated the legal system that should be used to interpret the will, or if they didn't, then their lex local domicile at the time of executing the will then be applied. I don't know if that is clear for you guys. I will repeat. So if there is a will, if A dies and A had a will, so A drew up that will in Johannesburg, and then he died, and then he died in let me just mute. Okay, I can't mute. Can I please ask that you mute yourself if possible? I'm not able to do so by myself. You can just check and see if your microphone is on. You can go ahead and mute yourself, because if I have to do that, I'm going to have to stop sharing the screen. Obviously, I can still stop sharing because there's nothing on the screen. So if the person dies in, let's say they die in the UK, but then they had a will, and then that will was drafted in Johannesburg, and then from the will, they're like, oh, okay, when I die, I would like the British legal system to apply when executing my will, and then that is what will be followed. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and mute September. Okay, cool. So let's look at the status of a child. Okay, all right, that worked now. Let's look at the status of a child born of married and unmarried parents. So whether a child is considered to be born of married or unmarried parents will depend on the domicile of the father at the time of the child's birth. Whether or not a child born to unmarried parents status changes if the parents subsequently marry will depend on the domicile of the father at the time of marriage. So let's put it like this. If a child is born of unmarried parents, that child will they will automatically take the domicile of their father, whether the parents are married or not. The domicile of the father will automatically be the domicile of the child. Okay. So whether or not a child born to unmarried parents, their status change. If the parents get married now, then the domicile of the father, or at the time of the marriage, will be the domicile of that particular child. And then in the cases of adoption, so the local domicile of the child at the time of adoption, or the law of the place where the child is being adopted, should be used to determine the validity and the consequences of adoption. Because there has been no authorities or authoritative, or court ruling on the matters of adoption. So the local domicile of the child at the time of adoption, or the law of the place where the child is adopted should be taken into account. So the law of the child where the law of the place where the child is adopted is called lexi adoptionis. So that should be taken into account. And then for those of you that do family law, you will remember when we spoke about matrimonial property. So this has to do with marriage. So in cases of marriage, the lexilocal domicile of the man at the time of the marriage determines the matrimonial property regime, including whether the marriage is in community or out of community of property. So let's simplify that. The domicile of the man, right? So previously we said the lexilocal domicile of the man. So it is the law of the country where a person is domiciled. So now we have these two people that are getting married or they're already married. So the domicile of the man at the time of the marriage will determine their matrimonial property regime. So if the man is domiciled in South Africa and is getting married wherever, whatever country, but he's still domiciled in South Africa, it means that, let's say, for example, they didn't have an antenuptial contract. So in South Africa, we know that if you're getting married and you don't have an antenuptial contract, your marriage automatically falls under a marriage in community of property. So irregardless of where that person is, as long as they are domiciled in South Africa, the matrimonial property regime that is going to be applied to that marriage because of their domicile will be of South Africa. And in this case, their marriage will be in community of property. So including whether the marriage is in community or out of community of property, this does not change even if the man subsequently changes domicile. If the parties had at the time of the marriage already agreed to settle somewhere else. So even if they already agreed that, okay, once we get married, we're going to go and settle in the United States. If at the time of marriage, the man was domiciled in South Africa, it means that the matrimonial property regime will be determined by the domicile of the man. So I will give you another example. And that example is that, so let's say, for example, a South African man who is working in England then meets an English woman and they get married and they don't have an antenuptial contract. But when they do so, they're getting married in Spain. They are on holiday in Spain. So this is a South African man who is working in England. And then while he's in England, he meets an English woman and they get married without an antenuptial contract while they are on holiday in Spain. So the couple will be married in community of property because the law of South Africa, which is where the man is domiciled at the time of marriage, will determine their matrimonial property regime. Okay. Okay. Okay, cool. So with regards to the law of procedure, generally the domicile of the defendant is used to determine which court has jurisdiction, that is the capacity to make a ruling in a particular matter. A matter affecting a person's status must be heard by the court in which the court with the jurisdiction in the area where domicile the area where the person is domiciled. So if there is a case, I don't know if we've spoken about this previously. I'm not so sure. It's supposed to be, I think, on introduction to law. So where a person is, with regards to the matters of jurisdiction. So let's say, for example, I was driving in Potchefstroom, and I'm from Johannesburg, and then I have an accident in Potchefstroom, and then in that accident I damage some properties, and then a case is opened against me. So it is either so a case is opened against me, and the question is where is the case going to be opened? So it's with matters of jurisdiction, this happens in two ways. They look at especially for criminal matters, the case will be opened in the area where the accident happened. So that is the matters of for criminal matters, for what do they call that? Causal areas. I'll have to look that up. And then in matters of civil procedure, where you have to claim, so this is within this context, then that particular case or the claim will have to be made at the jurisdiction where the defendant is domiciled. So let's say I'm domiciled in the defendant now is domiciled in Johannesburg, then that is where you're going to institute your claim, because obviously you want them to come to court and you want them to pay you whatever that is due to you. So the authority that will be able to do that is the one of Johannesburg. So if it does happen that you go and open your case at a different jurisdiction, at a wrong jurisdiction for that matter, your case might be thrown out, because the court will be like, okay, it looks like you're wasting our time now because we don't have jurisdiction over this matter, so we cannot hear this this particular matter at this time. Okay, I thought I just had to throw that in. So in cases relating to guardianship or the custody of a child, a court will have jurisdiction if the child is domiciled or is usually resident or is merely present at the time of the institution of the action in that court's area of jurisdiction. So we have three principles of domicile, and the two most important rules that are before we get to the the two most important rules of domicile are: number one, no person can be without domicile at any given time. So you can not be without domicile at any given time. So in other words, every person will always have domicile, and every person will acquire domicile at birth and will maintain this domicile until it changes. So when it changes, it will change either by operation of law or by choice. So the second one, no person will lose his or her domicile. Never, doesn't happen. No one loses their domicile of choice or by operation of law until he or she has acquired a new domicile. 6 minutes, okay. And then the last principle is that no person can have more than one domicile at any time. So once a person's new domicile comes into operation, the previous domicile will automatically be abandoned. So do you guys have any questions regarding that? Okay, no questions. So a change of domicile must always be proved on a balance of probabilities. So balance of probabilities. Hi, Ntlanhla, welcome, Ntlanhla. So when we're talking about the balance of probabilities, it has to be proven that this person is more either domiciled at Johannesburg more than they are in Potchefstroom. So that is the balance of probabilities. We have to weigh and say, okay, this person is either here or there. So it means that they are there. So for the purposes of law. So very important, you can highlight it, you can jot it down if you didn't. Principles of domicile: no person can be without domicile at any given time. No person will lose his or her domicile of choice or operation by law, and no person can have more than one domicile at a time. And a change of domicile must always be proved on a balance of probabilities. So we have 4 types of domicile. These are different types of domiciles are regulated by the Domicile Act, and this act came into operation on the 1st of August 1992. So when this act came into operation, it amended the legal rules regarding domicile, which were largely governed by common law. So for the purposes of domicile, people must be divided into 2 groups. The first group is for it consists of people who can choose their own domicile, and we say those people have a domicile of choice. And the second group consists of people who cannot choose their own domicile, and these people acquire domicile by operation of law. So guys, as you know that we after 40 minutes, we take a break so that we can restart our Zoom. So before I continue with the 4 types of domicile, I think we will take a short break and then we will be back in a few minutes. You can use the same link, the one that you used, and then you can come back. I will just give us like a minute and then I'll come back. I'm not going to wait that long before you guys come back in. So I'll just log out and then you can come back in immediately with the same link. I will see you guys in a minute.